Finding the killer isn't going to change my life at this point, but it will change the lives of my children and my grandchildren. This cloud needs to be removed from our family's head and this chapter closed for their benefit. So there is an answer.
If our DNA matched anything significant, they would have arrested us in a New York minute.
She was the spark plug of our family. Because of this zest that she had, she just kept things alive and hopping. It's not the same without her.
Why is it so hard for people to understand that we love this child with everything in our being? We would never touch a hair on the head of one of our children. I mean, it just is inconceivable to me.
We could find the killer tomorrow. He could be arrested, convicted, and jailed, and there'd still be 20% of the population would think that we had something to do with it.
Did your daughter have a bedwetting incident that night? Did you get up? Did you get angry? And did you hurt her?
No, I did not.
What is your reaction when you know many people think that's what you did?
They are wrong. I don't know what else to say. How else do you say no except no? No means no.
Going straight for the speech, John Ramsey shared updates on the investigation, focusing heavily on recent changes within the Boulder police force. He expressed a renewed sense of optimism about the direction of the case, emphasizing the strides made in the department's leadership and investigative approach. His remarks stood out for their positive tone, a shift from his historically critical stance toward law enforcement's handling of the case, and they highlighted his belief in the potential for progress under the new leadership. Ramsey began by discussing a significant overhaul in the Boulder Police Department that took place roughly a year prior, around 2024. He described this as a cleaning house, a term that underscored the magnitude of the changes within the department.
It's been probably a year ago, was sort of, they cleaned house in Boulder. Brought in a new police chief from the outside with good experience. He's a good guy. The Citizens Review Board recommended termination of 5 of their detectives for poor performance, including the one that had our case for years, and he was a poor performer.
According to Ramsey, the city brought in a new police chief from outside the organization, someone he characterized as having strong experience and a solid track record. This external appointment was a key point for Ramsey, as it signaled a break from the internal dynamics that had previously defined the department's approach. He viewed this change as a pivotal moment, suggesting that it marked a turning point in how the investigation might move forward. The introduction of fresh leadership, in Ramsey's view, brought a level of professionalism and perspective that he felt had been lacking in prior years. Beyond the appointment of a new chief, Ramsey elaborated on the broader restructuring within the Boulder Police Department.
So that was a big step, and I met with them, the chief of detectives, new guy, but experienced. The chief of police I've met with, 3 or 4 times now, and I'm impressed. They're competent people with experience and good, logical.
He noted that a citizen review board had played a critical role in evaluating the performance of the department's personnel. This board, he explained, recommended the termination of 5 detectives due to what he described as poor performance. Among those let go was the detective who'd been assigned to the case for several years. Ramsey's comments about this individual were pointed. He referred to the detective as a poor performer and emphasized his own firsthand experience with their shortcomings. While he didn't delve into specific incidents, his assertion carried weight, implying that he had observed deficiencies in the detective's work that impacted the investigation. This shakeup, Ramsey suggested, was a necessary step to clear out ineffective personnel and pave the way for more competent investigators. Ramsey's interactions with the new leadership further shaped his positive outlook. He shared that he had met with the new police chief multiple times, 3 or 4, by his count, and had also engaged with the new chief of detectives. These meetings left a strong impression on him. He described both individuals as competent people with experience and good logical common sense, qualities he clearly valued in those tasked with advancing the investigation. Ramsey's praise was not just for their credentials but for their approachability and willingness to engage with him directly. This marked a significant departure from his earlier experiences, where communication with law enforcement had often been strained. His repeated meetings with the chief suggested a level of access and collaboration that he found encouraging, fostering a belief was now better equipped to tackle the complexities of the case. The emphasis on competence and logic in Ramsey's remarks highlighted his confidence in the new leadership's ability to approach the investigation with clarity and diligence. He seemed particularly impressed by their practical, no-nonsense mindset, which he described as rooted in good logical common sense. This quality, in his view, was essential for navigating the challenges of a decades-old case that had long been mired in controversy and missteps. Ramsey's focus on these attributes suggested that he saw the new team as capable of making decisions based on evidence and reason, rather than being swayed by external pressures or preconceived notions. His comments conveyed a sense of relief that the investigation was now in the hands of individuals he trusted to prioritize progress over past mistakes. Ramsey also touched on the broader implications of the department's restructuring. The removal of underperforming detectives, coupled with the arrival of experienced leadership, created an environment where Ramsey felt real progress could be made. He didn't specify whether the new team had started re-examining the case from scratch, but his comments implied that they were open to exploring new avenues. This openness was a critical factor for Ramsey, who had long advocated for fresh perspectives in the investigation. The fact that the Citizen Review Board's recommendations led to tangible changes, such as the termination of detectives, reinforced his belief that the department was taking accountability seriously. For Ramsey, this was a sign that the Boulder Police Department was committed to addressing past failures and moving forward with renewed focus. Throughout his discussion, Ramsey's tone was one of measured optimism. He avoided dwelling on the frustrations of the past, instead focusing on the potential for the new leadership to make a difference. His repeated emphasis on the competence and experience of the new chief and detectives suggested that he saw them as capable of overcoming the obstacles that had previously stalled the investigation. Ramsey's willingness to engage with the department, as evidenced by his multiple meetings, indicated a desire to work collaboratively with law enforcement. This was a notable shift from the early years, where tensions with the police had often dominated discussions about the case. At CrimeCon 2025, Ramsey presented himself as a partner in the pursuit of answers, rather than an adversary to the authorities. Ramsey's remarks also carried undercurrent of hope that the changes in Boulder would lead to actionable outcomes. He spoke with a sense of urgency about the need to capitalize on the department's new direction. His focus on the leadership's logical approach suggested that he believed they could navigate the complexities of the case with a clear-eyed perspective. For Ramsey, the restructuring was more than just a personnel change. It was an opportunity to reset the investigation and pursue new leads with a team as capable and committed. His comments at CrimeCon reflected a belief that the Boulder Police Department, under its new leadership, was better positioned than ever to make meaningful progress. From what he told, it's clear that John Ramsey's relationship with law enforcement, particularly the Boulder Police Department, has undergone a notable evolution over the years, as evident in his public statements. Such a controversial shift. In the early years following the tragedy, Ramsey's interactions with the police were marked by tension and limited cooperation. He and his wife, Patsy, were cautious in their dealings with authorities, opting not to participate in unconditional interviews with the Boulder police. Instead, they engaged with law enforcement through carefully controlled channels, such as a 1997 Fin interview, and relied heavily on their legal team to manage communications. Ramsey's reluctance to fully cooperate, including his refusal to take an FBI-administered polygraph test, fueled public and media scrutiny. He later agreed to an independent polygraph in 2000, which he passed, but this decision came after significant pressure, and only through a private examiner, further highlighting his guarded approach. At the time, Ramsey's public statements often criticized the police for what he perceived as mismanagement of the investigation, particularly their handling of the crime scene and their focus on the family as suspects. This adversarial stance defined his early interactions, as he positioned himself and his family as unfairly targeted by an incompetent department. As the years progressed, Ramsey's rhetoric toward law enforcement remained critical, particularly through the 2000s. He frequently pointed to what he saw as systemic failures within the Boulder Police Department, accusing them of fixating on the family while neglecting other leads, such as the possibility of an intruder. In various interviews and public appearances, Ramsey expressed frustration with the department's refusal to fully explore DNA evidence that he believed could exonerate his family. He advocated for the case to be transferred to federal authorities, such as the FBI, arguing that Boulder lacked the expertise to handle such a complex investigation. During this period, Ramsey's public was shaped by a sense of grievance against the police, whom he portrayed as obstructionist and overly focused on the wrong suspects. His criticisms were often aired through media outlets, including appearances on programs like 48 Hours and in books, such as Paula Woodward's We Have Your Daughter, which aligned with his narrative of a botched investigation. This approach kept the spotlight on the police's shortcomings while reinforcing Ramsey's image as a grieving father seeking justice. By the 2010s, Ramsey's tone began to shift, albeit gradually, as changes within the Boulder Police Department and broader developments in forensic technology offered new possibilities. The 2000 exhumation of the Ramsey family, based on advanced DNA testing that identified an unknown male's genetic material, marked a turning point. Ramsey began to focus less on direct confrontation with law enforcement and more on advocating for the use of emerging forensic tools, such as genetic genealogy, to pursue fresh leads. His public statements during this period reflected a growing emphasis on solutions rather than blame, though he still occasionally referenced past mistakes by the police. By engaging with media and true crime platforms, Ramsey maintained ability for the case while subtly reframing his relationship with law enforcement as one of cautious hope. This shift became more pronounced by 2024, as Ramsey noted at CrimeCon 2025, when he described significant changes within the Boulder Police Department that restored some of his confidence. We can see that at CrimeCon Denver 2025, Ramsey's comments about the Boulder police were strikingly positive compared to his earlier years. Ramsey's shift in tone could also reflect a pragmatic recognition that continued criticism of law enforcement might hinder progress. By fostering a positive relationship with the new leadership, he may hope to encourage the department to allocate resources to the case, particularly for advanced DNA testing. The relationship between John and the police is still something that needs closer examination. But we can already see a striking story back in 1996, when John kept pointing fingers at the police, blaming their mistakes for ruining the investigation and damaging key evidence. Yet if we consider the suspicions and the evidence pointing back at the family, especially under the Ramsey did it theory, those same police blunders ended up working in John's favor. So the question stands from the very beginning, were the police already part of John's cover-up plan? One of the most glaring issues was the failure to secure the crime scene properly. When police arrived at the Ramsey home, they treated the situation as a kidnapping based on the ransom note found by Patsy Ramsey. Officers allowed friends and family to move freely through the house, touching surfaces and potentially contaminating critical forensic evidence. This lax approach was later criticized by former Boulder Police Chief Mark Beckner, who admitted in a 2015 interview that the department's inexperience and understaffing during the holiday season led to significant oversights. Detective Linda Arndt, one of the first officers on the scene, was left alone to manage a chaotic environment with multiple civilians present, a situation that could have been exploited if someone, such as John Ramsey, intended to obscure physical evidence. The decision by Officer Rick French to overlook a latched basement door during the initial search further compounded the mishandling. French reasoned that the wooden latch, secured from the inside, ruled out the door as an exit point for a kidnapper, so he did not investigate further. Hours later, John Ramsey, prompted by Arndt to search the house, went directly to this basement room and discovered JonBené. The speed and specificity with which John located his daughter raised suspicions, particularly for Arndt, who later noted his behavior seemed unusually focused. This incident aligns with the staging theory, as it allowed John to control the moment and manner of the discovery, potentially disrupting forensic evidence by moving it upstairs. The fact that no precautions were taken to preserve the rest of the house beyond JonBenét's bedroom meant that any staged elements, such as the ransom note or the arrangement of the body, could remain unchallenged by immediate forensic scrutiny. This oversight benefited John Ramsey by delaying a thorough examination of the scene, giving the family time to consult attorneys and shape their narrative. Another critical mishandling was the Boulder Police Department's decision to share investigative details with the Ramsey family's legal team. The district attorney's office, under Alex Hunter, allowed Ramsey attorneys to review police files and physical evidence, an extraordinary privilege not typically granted to suspects. This access, as noted in a 1999 EBSCO Research Starters document, enabled the Ramseys to stay ahead of the investigation, potentially adjusting their statements to counter emerging evidence, while the police were building a case against Patsy Ramsey, suspecting her of writing the ransom note. Hunter's office treated the family as victims, creating a rift that hindered the investigation. This unusual leniency aligns with the theory that John Ramsey, a wealthy and influential businessman, leveraged his status to influence key figures, not necessarily through direct bribery but through relationships or pressure. The day's actions suggest that someone within the system, possibly Hunter himself or a close associate, facilitated this preferential treatment, which could have been orchestrated to protect the Ramsey family's interests. On the side of the court, one of the earliest indications of favorable treatment came from the district attorney's office under Alex Hunter, who consistently treated the Ramseys more as victims than suspects. The decision by Alex Hunter not to pursue charges recommended by the 1990 grand jury further underscores the perception of favoritism. The grand jury voted to indict John and Patsy Ramsey on charges resulting in death and obstruction of justice, based on the belief that they had placed JonBené in a dangerous situation and hindered the prosecution of the true perpetrator. Despite this, Hunter declined to sign the indictment, citing insufficient evidence to meet the beyond a reasonable doubt standard required for a conviction. This ruling, detailed in court documents unsealed in 2013, effectively shielded the Ramseys from prosecution, allowing them to avoid legal consequences despite significant suspicion. Critics, including former friends of the Ramseys who demanded a special prosecutor in 1998, as reported by the New York Times, argued that Hunter's decision reflected a bias toward protecting the family. The DA's reluctance to move forward, contrasted with the police's aggressive stance, suggests that Hunter or key members of his office may have been influenced by John Ramsey's social standing or connections, though no direct evidence of collaboration exists. Another instance of favorable treatment came from the actions of Detective Lou Smit, hired by Hunter's office in 1997 to assist with the investigation. Smit, a seasoned investigator, quickly diverged from the police's focus on the Ramseys, advocating instead for the intruder theory. He presented findings to the Boulder police in 1998, arguing that evidence like an unidentified boot mark in a broken basement window pointed to an outside perpetrator. Smit's resignation later that year, citing frustration with the police's fixation on the Ramseys, was seen by some as a principled stand, but it also aligned with the Ramseys' narrative of innocence. His public defense of the family, including appearances in media like the 2002 48 Hours Investigates, bolstered their case by shifting focus to an unknown intruder. While Smit's actions were driven by his professional judgment, his alignment with the Ramseys' interests raises questions about whether John Ramsey's influence, perhaps through the DA's office, indirectly shaped Smit's role. The detective's access to case files and his ability to pursue an alternative theory provided the Ramseys with a powerful advocate within the system, one whose work continued to influence the case after his departure. The Boulder Police Department's handling of the Ramsey family's interviews also reflects a leniency that benefited John Ramsey. Despite being primary suspects, John and Patsy were not subjected to immediate, separate, formal interrogations. Instead, they were allowed to delay their first official interviews until April 1997, nearly 4 months after the crime, as noted in the Wikipedia document. This delay, which former police chief Mark Beckner later called a critical error, gave the Ramseys time to consult with attorneys and align their stories, potentially mitigating inconsistencies that could have arisen under early pressure. The initial interviews, conducted together rather than separately, further deviated from standard procedure, allowing the couple to support each other's accounts. This leniency, whether due to inexperience or external influence, provided John Ramsey with a strategic advantage, as it minimized the risk of incriminating statements in the critical early phase of the investigation. While no specific officer is named as facilitating this delay, the overall investigative culture, marked by deference to the Ramsey status, suggests that key personnel may have been swayed, intentionally or not, to act in ways that favored the family. The strategic leaks to the media by the Boulder police, intended to pressure the Ramseys, paradoxically created an environment that Ramsey could exploit to his advantage. As documented in the Netflix series Cold Case, Who Killed JonBené Ramsey's 2024, the police leaked details such as the ransom note's content and the absence of footprints in the snow to create public pressure, hoping the Ramseys would cooperate more fully. However, these leaks fueled a media frenzy that obscured the investigation's focus and allowed the Ramseys to counter with defamation lawsuits, as seen in their successful cases against outlets like Star Magazine and CBS. The leaks, while meant to incriminate John Ramsey, provided a platform to challenge the validity of police evidence publicly, casting himself as a victim of an overzealous investigation. If John had intended to stage the crime scene, the media chaos served as a convenient distraction, drawing attention to disputed evidence while deflecting scrutiny from other aspects of the case. The involvement of specific officers in leaks is not detailed, but the pattern suggests that a small number of individuals within the department, possibly acting under pressure or misjudgment, inadvertently aided the Ramseys' narrative. The relationship between the Ramsey family and the district attorney's office under Mary Lacy, who succeeded Hunter in 2002, further illustrates a pattern of favorable treatment. Lacey's office pursued the intruder theory aggressively, culminating in a 2008 public exoneration of the Ramseys based on touch day evidence found on JonBenét's clothing. This belonging to an unknown male and excluding the Ramseys, was cited by Lacey as definitive proof of their innocence, a move criticized by Beckner and other investigators like Gordon Coombs as premature. Coombs, a former DA investigator, revealed in 2016 that Lacey discouraged dissent against the intruder theory, creating an environment where staff felt pressured to align with her stance. This dynamic, reported in the Wikipedia document, suggests that Lacey's office may have been influenced by the Ramseys' legal team or John's persistent advocacy for DNA testing. While Lacey's actions were framed as following scientific evidence, her close relationship with the Ramseys, criticized by Boulder's mayor, Leslie Durgeon, raises questions about whether John Ramsey leveraged his influence to steer the investigation away from his family. The role of specific individuals within the DA's office, beyond Hunter and Lacey, also points to potential cooperation, albeit indirect. Michael Caine, appointed as a special prosecutor by Governor Roy Romer in 1998 to oversee the grand jury, was tasked with bridging the gap between the police and DA. However, Caine's efforts did not result in charges, as Hunter ultimately overruled the grand jury's recommendation. This outcome, while consistent with legal standards, benefited John Ramsey by keeping the case unresolved and allowing him to maintain his innocence publicly. Similarly, the involvement of forensic experts like Barry Scheck and Henry Lee, who testified during the grand jury proceedings, lent credibility to the Ramseys' defense by emphasizing ambiguities in the evidence. While there is no evidence that these experts were directly influenced by John, their involvement, facilitated through the DA's office, aligned with the family's interests by casting doubt on the police's case. The cumulative effect of these decisions, evidence sharing, delayed interviews, grand jury dismissal, media leaks, and DNA exoneration, created a pattern of outcomes that consistently favored John Ramsey. The police's initial mishandlings, such as failing to secure the crime scene or conduct timely interrogations, gave John time to solidify his narrative. The DA's actions, particularly under Hunter and Lacey, provided legal protections and public exonerations that shielded the family from prosecution. While no direct evidence confirms that specific individuals like Hunter, Lacey, or Smit were arranged by John Ramsey, their decisions aligned suspiciously with his interests. The leaks, though initiated by the police, inadvertently supported the Ramseys by creating a chaotic narrative that John's legal team could exploit. The absence of named insiders within the police department suggests that any cooperation was likely subtle, driven by John's social influence rather than overt collusion. The ongoing focus on DNA evidence, as seen in John's 2025 meeting with Boulder Police Chief Steve Redfern to push for genetic genealogy, continues to reflect his ability to steer the investigation toward avenues that reinforce his innocence, a dynamic that began with the earliest investigative decisions. John's connection with part of the police force through the way they carried out the investigation led to interactions that seemed completely contradictory. And for those who suspect John Ramsey, everything about it looks far more serious. From the outset, a main part of the Boulder police directed their investigation almost exclusively toward the Ramsey family, sidelining any broader search for external suspects. John Ramsey has recounted how he immediately sensed that he and Patsy were viewed as the primary culprits, with officers treating them more like perpetrators than grieving parents. This narrow focus manifested in repeated interrogations that probed their personal lives and relationships, rather than canvassing the neighborhood or pursuing leads on potential intruders. John described an early call from a colleague warning him that the police believed he had killed his daughter, prompting him to hire a defense attorney the very next day. This suspicion permeated every interaction, as detectives seemed convinced that the crime originated within the household, dismissing alternative theories outright. Central to the police's skepticism was the ransom note, which they suspected had been authored by John or Patsy themselves. The demand for $118,000 struck investigators as too specific, matching nearly exactly the bonus John had received from Lockheed that year. Officers viewed this as insider knowledge, implying that only someone intimately familiar with the family's finances could have chosen that amount. John has pointed out that his pay stubs were likely lying around the house, but the police latched onto this detail to bolster their case against the family, rather than exploring how an outsider might have accessed such information. They subjected Patsy's handwriting to intense scrutiny, forcing her to provide samples written right-handed and left-handed, and even though experts later ruled her out, the initial doubt lingered, fueling leaks to the media that painted her as the note's creator. On the day JonBenét was discovered, the police's actions further highlighted their underlying distrust. They allowed John and his friend Fleet White to search the house unsupervised, which led to John's discovery in the basement. rather than appreciating this as a father's desperate effort. Detectives later criticized disturbing the crime scene by picking her up, removing tape from her mouth, and attempting to untie her wrists. John has argued that any parent would react similarly, driven by instinct and hope, but the police interpreted it as a deliberate attempt to tamper with evidence. This scrutiny extended to the sequence of events, with officers questioning why John went straight to the wine cellar door, instead of methodically checking every room as instructed. He explained that he was simply following a hunch in the chaos, but the implication was clear: his movements seemed too purposeful, as if he already knew where to look. The police also fixated on John's demeanor and statements during those initial hours, deeming him suspiciously calm. When he called 911 and throughout the morning, officers noted his composed manner, contrasting it with what they expected from a distraught parent. John has countered that he was channeling his energy into practical steps, like arranging the ransom money by increasing his ATM limit and handing his card to a friend. Yet, detectives like Linda Arndt documented observations that portrayed him as detached, casually sorting through mail while awaiting the kidnapper's call, or not reacting dramatically when 10 a.m. passed without contact. John clarified that he was scanning the mail for additional notes from the perpetrator and assumed tomorrow in the ransom letter meant the next day, but these explanations fell on deaf ears. Arndt even claimed on national television that she saw guilt in his eyes, a subjective judgment that underscored the personal bias infiltrating the investigation. Even the discovery of unidentified male DNA on JonBenét's clothing failed to sway the police from their family-centric theory. Early tests in January 1997 revealed genetic material that didn't match John, Patsy, or Burke, including samples from blood spots mixed with saliva enzymes. However, the Boulder police downplayed this, suggesting it could be contamination from manufacturing or unrelated handling, rather than the killer's trace. John has accused them of withholding this exculpatory evidence from the district attorney for 6 months, as it contradicted their narrative. Subsequent touch DNA on her leggings in 2008 reinforced the presence of an unknown male, yet officers continued to argue it wasn't definitive, refusing to shift their focus. This reluctance persisted despite advancements in forensic genealogy, with John lamenting that the police prioritized explaining away the DNA over using it to hunt for matches in databases. Pressure from the police extended to demands for polygraph tests, which they insisted John and Patsy undergo to prove their innocence. John has described this as coercive, noting that the family only agreed years later, and only under the condition that it not be administered by the FBI, reflecting deep mutual distrust. The results cleared them, but the initial push exemplified how investigators sought to corner the Ramseys, treating their hesitation as further evidence of guilt. This tactic alienated the family, who felt the tests were more about entrapment than truth-seeking, especially since the police had already formed their opinions based on behavioral cues rather than hard evidence. Publicly, certain Boulder officers and detectives, such as Steve Thomas, openly asserted that the Ramseys were responsible, coining the phrase, "Ramsey did it," in media appearances and books. They leaked selective information to the press, amplifying suspicions and turning public opinion against John, who was often depicted as the prime suspect. John has highlighted how these disclosures, including details about the ransom note and crime scene, were framed to suggest a cover-up, while exculpatory elements like the DNA were minimized or omitted. This strategy not only isolated the family, but also pressured the district attorney, creating a toxic atmosphere where John felt perpetually on trial in the court of public opinion. The culmination of this suspicion came with the 1999 grand jury, convened under intense pressure from the police and public. After months of testimony, the jury issued true bills accusing John and Patsy of mistreatment resulting in death and accessory to a crime, implying they had placed JonBenét in a dangerous situation and helped conceal it. Although the district attorney declined to prosecute due to insufficient evidence, the indictments reflected how thoroughly the police had built a case against the family. John was not even called to testify, despite offering, which he saw as a deliberate avoidance of his direct input. His children, including a pregnant Melinda and Burke, were subpoenaed, adding to the family's stress and underscoring the invasive nature of the probe. Beyond overt actions, John has accused the Boulder police of deliberately concealing or mishandling evidence that could support an intruder theory. He pointed out that officers spent only about 2 hours processing the crime scene initially, rushing through without sealing off the house properly or collecting all potential traces. For instance, the broken basement window and the suitcase positioned beneath it were noted, but not thoroughly investigated. John reported these anomalies to Detective Arndt, suggesting they indicated an entry or exit point, yet they were dismissed as insignificant. Similarly, unidentified fibers and hairs found at the scene were not prioritized, and the police delayed requesting the clothing worn by the family that born until a year later. risking contamination of biological evidence. John believes this cursory approach was intentional, allowing officers to maintain their narrative while ignoring clues that pointed elsewhere. The notepad and draft versions of the ransom in the house were another area of contention. John argued that the police failed to disclose or explain these findings transparently, instead using them to insinuate Patsy's involvement without acknowledging that an intruder could have used household items. This selective handling extended to the overall scene, where potential fingerprints, palm prints on the basement door, and other traces went unidentified or unpublicized. A district attorney later ordered a return to the house for more thorough forensics. But by then John felt critical opportunities had been lost, perpetuating the bias against the family. The police's tactics also strained John's relationships, particularly with Fleet White, who was initially a close friend present on the morning of the discovery. Fleet accompanied John during the basement search and witnessed the body being found, but their bond fractured afterward. John attributed this to police influence, claiming officers pulled Fleet aside for hours of questioning, planting seeds of doubt and turning him against the Ramseys. Upon returning from that session, Fleet's demeanor changed. He became distant and accusatory. This rift escalated during JonBenét's funeral in Atlanta, where friends hosting Fleet reported his bizarre behavior, leading to him being moved to stay with John's brother, who then warned of potential danger. John speculated that detectives leveraged Fleet, perhaps suggesting John suspected him, as a way to isolate the family and extract incriminating slips. Fleet later interrupted a meeting with the Ramseys' minister, further straining ties, and John viewed this as a deliberate police strategy to erode support networks without solid evidence. Small but telling details reinforced police's perception of bias to John and his role to the case. For example, the police overlooked a 911 call from the Ramsey home on December 23, which Fleet attributed to a misdeal. Officers also ignored similarities to a nearby assault 9 months later, where an intruder hid in a home, dismissing connections because that victim survived. John argued that by not being transparent, releasing only damaging information while burying favorable reports, the police effectively hid evidence from the public and the district attorney. It can be concluded that the investigative force in this case was deeply divided, with one side seen as taking actions that benefited John Ramsey and his family, while on the other side there were investigators who placed suspicion, even outright bias, directly on John and his household. What's especially striking is that because of the enormous efforts and money poured into shaping the narrative from the Ramsey family, today we hear far less from those who once doubted John and his family. The question remains, what happened to them? About those who once suspected John and his family, it's quite unusual and striking that so many of them ended up facing negative consequences, losing their careers, getting sued, being silenced, or even dying before their suspicions could ever be proven. Let's go first with Jim Clemente, a retired FBI profiler and criminal behavioral analyst who played a significant role in re-examining the JonBenét Ramsey case through his involvement in the 2016 CBS docuseries, The Case of JonBenét Ramsey. As a lead investigator in the documentary, Clemente assembled a team of experts, including forensic scientist Henry Lee, forensic pathologist Werner Spitz, and former Scotland Yard behavioral analyst Laura Richards, to reassess evidence and challenge existing narratives. His approach focused on applying modern forensic techniques and behavioral analysis to scrutinize key elements like the 9/11 call, ransom note, and crime scene. Clemente's expertise in profiling led him to question the official exoneration of the Ramsey family, particularly John and Patsy Ramsey, who had been cleared by District Attorney Mary Lacey in 2008 based on touch DNA evidence. In a 2016 interview with Cosmopolitan, Clement called this exoneration absurd, arguing that the trace DNA found on JonBenét's clothing could have originated from innocent sources, such as manufacturing, and did not definitively rule out the family's involvement. His skepticism about the intruder theory, championed by investigators like Lou Smit, positioned him as a vocal critic of the Ramseys, aligning his findings with the family member theory that implicated John, Patsy, or their son Burke. Clemente's investigation in the CBS docuseries produced several findings that cast suspicion on the Ramsey family, particularly regarding inconsistencies in their account of the night of the crime. One of his key focuses was the 9/11 call made by Patsy Ramsey, which he analyzed alongside Laura Richards and 9/11 dispatcher Kimberly Archuleta. The team used enhanced audio techniques to claim they detected 3 voices, Patsy, John, and a child, presumed to be Burke, despite the Ramseys' assertion that Burke was asleep during the call. Clement suggested that John's voice, saying, "We're not speaking to you," indicated he was addressing a child, contradicting the family's timeline. This finding, highlighted in the docuseries, implied that the Ramseys may have misled investigators about Burke's whereabouts, fueling speculation of a cover-up. Additionally, Clemente's team reconstructed the Ramsey home's basement to test the intruder theory, concluding that an intact spiderweb in the basement window made it unlikely an outsider entered that way. He argued that the DNA evidence, often cited to exonerate the Ramseys, was insignificant, as it could have been transferred during clothing production, a view supported by forensic scientist Henry Lee. These findings directly challenged John Ramsey's narrative of an external perpetrator, pointing instead to potential family involvement. The CBS docuseries, aired on September 18 and 19, 2016, sparked significant backlash from the Ramsey family, leading to a high-profile defamation lawsuit against CBS and its investigators, including Clement. Burke Ramsey, represented by attorney L. Lynn Wood, filed a $750 million lawsuit in December 2016, alleging that the docuseries falsely accusing his sister by suggesting he struck her with a flashlight over a dispute involving pineapple. The lawsuit, detailed in a 2017 Westward article, named Clement Richards, Lee Spitz, and others, claiming the program was a rehash of investigator Jim Keller's 2012 book Foreign Faction, rather than a new investigation. John Ramsey followed with a separate $350 million lawsuit in 2017, arguing that the docuseries defamed the family by implicating them in a staged crime. The lawsuits contended that Clemente's conclusions, particularly the assertion that Burke was awake during the 9/11 call and that the family staged the scene, were baseless and damaging. Both lawsuits were settled in January 2019 to the satisfaction of all parties, as reported by Westward. But the public nature of Clement's accusations left a lasting impact on the Ramseys' reputation. Clemente's involvement in the case extended beyond the docuseries, culminating in a controversial incident at CrimeCon 2024, where he reportedly confronted John Ramsey with pointed questions about the case. While specific details of the exchange are limited, sources indicate that Clemente's questions challenged John's account of the events, focusing on inconsistencies in the family's timeline and the staging theory. This confrontation led to another defamation lawsuit filed by John Ramsey against Clemente, seeking $980 million in damages. The lawsuit, referenced in online discussions on social network platforms, alleged that Clemente's public remarks at CrimeCon 2024 were defamatory and caused significant harm to John's reputation. As part of the legal fallout, Clemente was reportedly restricted from disclosing further details about the case, effectively limiting his ability to discuss his findings or theories publicly. These restrictions, imposed as a condition of the lawsuit or settlement negotiations, have silenced Clement on the Ramsey case since the 2024 event, preventing him from elaborating on his suspicions about John and the family. Among the investigators who approached this case right from the early stages, Steve Thomas, a Boulder Police Department detective, emerged as one of the most vocal critics of the Ramsey family, firmly believing they were involved in the crime. Thomas joined the investigation early and quickly became convinced that the family, particularly Patsy Ramsey, had orchestrated a cover-up. His frustration grew as he perceived the district attorney's office, under Alex Hunter, as obstructing efforts to pursue the Ramseys aggressively. In 1998, Thomas resigned from the Boulder Police Department, disillusioned by what he saw as a failure to hold the family accountable. He channeled his findings and criticisms into his 2000 book. The book accused the Ramseys of manipulating the investigation and criticized Hunter for leniency, alleging that political and social influences protected the family. Thomas's public accusations drew significant attention but also provoked a fierce response from the Ramseys. In 2001, John and Patsy Ramsey filed a defamation lawsuit against Thomas, Davis, and their publisher, St. Martin's Press, claiming the book falsely implicated them in their daughter's death. The lawsuit was settled out of court in 2002, with undisclosed terms. But the legal battle took a toll on Thomas. The controversy effectively derailed his career in law enforcement, as he became persona non grata in the field, spending years defending his stance while facing public and professional backlash. The settlement, while resolving the legal dispute, left Thomas's reputation tarnished, and he faded from the investigative spotlight, his career overshadowed by the Ramsey case. Linda Arndt, another Boulder police detective, also faced severe consequences for her outspoken suspicions about John Ramsey. As one of the first officers at the Ramsey home on December 26, 1996, Arndt was present when John discovered JonBenét's body in the basement. Her observations during those chaotic hours led her to suspect John's involvement, particularly due to his behavior and the rapid discovery of the body after she prompted him to search the house. In a 1999 interview with ABC's Good Morning America, Arndt made a chilling statement, recalling how she counted her bullets while standing near John, fearing he might pose a threat. She publicly suggested that John Ramsey was the likely perpetrator, a stance that placed her at odds with both the district attorney's office and segments of the public. Arndt's outspokenness came at a steep price. Her credibility was attacked, with critics, including Ramsey supporters, questioning her professionalism and handling of the crime scene, which had been compromised by allowing civilians to roam the house. The intense scrutiny and media pressure eroded her standing within the Boulder Police Department, and she left the force in 1999. Arndt's career never recovered, and she retreated from public life, living reclusively while facing ongoing criticism for her role in the botched investigation. The Ramsey family never directly sued Arndt, but the public backlash and professional isolation she endured were significant, marking her as a cautionary tale of an investigator who challenged a powerful family and paid the price. James Kohler, a former investigator who later became a lead investigator for the Boulder County District Attorney's Office, also faced significant repercussions for his suspicions about the Ramsey family. Kohler joined the case in 2004 under DA Mary Lacey, tasked with examining evidence and leads. Over time, he developed a theory that leaned heavily toward family involvement, particularly suggesting that Burke Ramsey, then 9 years old, might have been involved in an accidental incident that the family covered up. Kohler's suspicions were detailed in his 2012 book, which argued that the Ramseys had manipulated the investigation to avoid scrutiny. Unlike Steve Thomas, Kohler avoided directly accusing John or Patsy of murder, but implied a family-orchestrated cover-up, focusing on inconsistencies in their behavior and the investigative mishandlings that allowed them to evade prosecution. The book drew immediate ire from the Ramsey family and their legal team. While John and Patsy did not file a direct lawsuit against Kohler, their attorney, L. Lynn Wood, aggressively criticized the book, labeling it speculative and damaging. The Ramsey family's public counterattacks, amplified by their media appearances and legal victories in other defamation cases, turned Kohler into a target for Ramsey supporters. Online forums and pro-Ramsey advocates scrutinized his work, accusing him of exploiting the case for personal gain. The backlash damaged Kohler's reputation, positioning him as an outcast among those who endorsed the intruder theory or the Ramsey's exoneration. The consequences faced by Thomas, Arndt, and Kohler highlight the professional and personal risks of challenging the Ramsey family. Steve Thomas's book and subsequent lawsuit marked a turning point, as the legal battle drained his resources and sidelined his career. The settlement with St. Martin's Press, while confidential, did little to restore his standing in law enforcement, and he became a symbol of the investigation's internal divisions. Thomas's outspokenness, particularly his criticism of D. Alex Hunter's handling, alienated him from colleagues who preferred to avoid the Ramsey legal machine. Similarly, Linda Arndt's public statements about John Ramsey made her a lightning rod for criticism. Her claim about fearing John during the investigation was sensationalized, but it also painted her as unprofessional in the eyes of some, especially as the Boulder police faced scrutiny for their own errors. Arndt's departure from the force and subsequent reclusive life reflect the toll of her involvement, as she became a scapegoat for the investigation's failures. James Kohler, while not facing a direct lawsuit, endured a different kind of fallout. His book, intended to shed light on overlooked aspects of the case, instead drew him into the Ramsey family's ongoing battle to control the narrative. The Ramseys' legal team, led by Wood, leveraged their influence to discredit Kohler's claims, framing them as speculative and harmful. This public and media backlash isolated Kohler, limiting his ability to influence the case further. The experiences of these investigators underscore the intense pressure surrounding the Ramsey case, particularly for those who suspected John Ramsey and his family. Thomas's resignation and book exposed the internal rifts between the Boulder police and the DA's office, but his defamation lawsuit underscored the Ramseys' willingness to use legal means to silence critics. Arndt's career collapse was exacerbated by her public comments, which, while bold, left her vulnerable to attacks from Ramsey supporters and media outlets. Kohler's attempt to revive the family member theory through his book met with fierce resistance, not through legal action but through a concerted effort by the Ramseys to undermine his credibility. Each investigator faced a form of professional exile, whether through lawsuits, public criticism, or ostracism within their field. The Ramsey family's aggressive legal strategy, spearheaded by L. Lynn Wood, played a significant role in these outcomes, as seen in their successful defamation suits against media outlets like CBS and Star magazine. The pattern of consequences suggests that challenging John Ramsey carried significant risks, as the family's resources and legal acumen created formidable barriers for investigators pursuing the family member theory. This outcome also happened with the side of John's allies. Alex Hunter became a central figure in this struggle, often criticized for his apparent leniency toward the Ramseys. As mentioned, early in the investigation, Hunter's office clashed with the Boulder Police Department, which aggressively pursued John and Patsy Ramsey as suspects. Despite the police's push for action, Hunter resisted, notably refusing to prosecute the Ramseys after a 1999 grand jury recommended charges against them. This stance drew sharp criticism from investigators like Steve Thomas, who resigned in 1998 and later accused Hunter of succumbing to political or financial pressures from the Ramsey's influential circle in his book. Hunter's actions, including allowing the Ramsey legal team access to police files, fueled perceptions of favoritism, with Boulder's mayor, Leslie Durgeon, publicly questioning his relationship with the family in 2001. The controversy surrounding his handling of the case overshadowed his long career, and by the time he left office in 2001, he was widely seen as having mishandled a high-profile investigation, leaving his legacy mired in accusations of bias and ineffectiveness. The factional divide deepened with the arrival of Mary Lacy, who succeeded Hunter as Boulder County District Attorney in 2001 and took a markedly different approach. Unlike Hunter, whose leniency was perceived as passive, Lacy actively aligned herself with the Ramseys, becoming a staunch advocate for their innocence. In 2008, Lacy issued a public letter of apology and his family, formally exonerating them based on touch DNA evidence that pointed to an unknown male. This decision, announced on July 9, 2008, and reported by CNN, marked a dramatic shift from the police's early suspicions and Hunter's cautious neutrality. Lacy's exoneration was controversial, drawing criticism from former police chief Mark Beckner, who in a 2015 Reddit AMA called it absurd and premature, arguing that the DNA evidence was not conclusive. Lacy's close relationship with the Ramseys, as noted by former investigator Gordon Coombs in 2016, created an environment where dissent against the intruder theory was discouraged within her office. Coombs revealed that staff were pressured to support Lacy's stance, with some fearing job loss if they questioned her conclusions. This alignment with the Ramseys positioned Lacy as a key figure in the faction supporting John Ramsey, contrasting sharply with investigators like Thomas and Linda Arndt, who faced professional ruin for their suspicions. We can see that the conflict between these factions, those opposing the Ramseys and those supporting them, played out not only within the legal system, but also in the public arena, where community and media forces amplified the consequences for those involved. Alex Hunter faced a form of professional exile. His refusal to prosecute, while legally defensible, was seen by many as capitulation to the Ramseys' influence as a wealthy and connected family. Public and media scrutiny, particularly from outlets like the Boulder Daily Camera, painted Hunter as ineffective, and his decision to step down in 2001 was viewed by some as an acknowledgement of his damaged credibility. The community's distrust, fueled by media reports and the Ramseys' legal victories in defamation lawsuits against outlets like Star magazine, effectively eliminated Hunter's standing, ending his career on a note of controversy. The Ramsey family's ability to leverage their resources, through attorney L. Lynn Wood, ensured that critics like Hunter faced lasting reputational damage, even if they escaped direct legal repercussions. Mary Lacy, on the other hand, became a target for those who opposed the Ramseys, illustrating how the community and media could eliminate those perceived as too supportive of John Ramsey. Her 2008 exoneration of the family was met with fierce backlash from investigators and the public, who saw it as a betrayal of the case's integrity. Former FBI profiler Jim Clemente, in a 2016 Cosmopolitan interview, criticized Lacy's decision, arguing it ignored broader evidence and relied too heavily on inconclusive DNA. The media, including programs like the 2016 CBS use of JonBenét Ramsey, amplified this criticism, portraying Lacy as overly sympathetic to the Ramseys. Her tenure, which ended in 2009, was defined by this controversial move, and her reputation suffered as a result. The broader conflict between these factions suggests a deeper struggle, where John Ramsey's influence, whether through wealth, legal strategy, or social connections, could neutralize critics, while community and media forces targeted his supporters. Hunter's career ended under a cloud of suspicion for his perceived leniency, driven by public narratives that he had failed to pursue justice. Lacy, conversely, faced professional ostracism for her overt support of the Ramseys, with her exoneration decision becoming a focal point for those advocating the family member theory. The Ramseys' legal actions demonstrated their ability to silence detractors, while the community's response, through media scrutiny and public forums, equally punished those who aligned with them. This dynamic created a vicious cycle where figures like Hunter and Lacy, caught in the crossfire, saw their careers and reputations diminished, reflecting the intense stakes of taking a side in the Ramsey case. The question of whether John Ramsey actually bribed the police to serve his cover-up plan seems rather clear, with too many coincidences in timing and intent among those involved. However, this perspective still depends on individual viewpoints. What can be said with certainty is that John will no longer be able to single-handedly control every narrative of the case the way he once did, and the investigation will continue to move forward with new developments. Until now, the Boulder Police Department, or BPD, remains the primary agency overseeing the JonBenét Ramsey case, maintaining its status as an active cold case investigation. The department's Major Crimes Unit continues to dedicate resources to this high-profile case, collaborating with a range of federal, state, and private entities to pursue new leads. The BPD has processed an extensive volume of evidence, including over 21,000 tips, more than 1,000 interviews conducted across 17 states and 2 foreign countries, and forensic samples from over 200 individuals, such as DNA fingerprints and handwriting. In recent years, the BPD has prioritized DIGI's vast evidence archive, creating a comprehensive searchable database to streamline investigative efforts. This initiative, completed with assistance from the FBI, has enabled detectives to revisit old leads with fresh perspectives and leverage advancements in forensic technology. The BPD's commitment to the case is evident in its ongoing partnerships and its public statements emphasizing that the investigation remains a top priority. Chief Stephen Redfern, who currently leads the BPD, has been directly involved in overseeing these efforts, ensuring that the department remains proactive in exploring every viable avenue. Chief Stephen Redfern plays a pivotal role in guiding the investigation, bringing over 20 years of policing experience to the effort. In September 2025, he met with John Ramsey and his son, John Andrew Ramsey, at CrimeCon in Aurora, Colorado, for a 30-minute discussion to provide updates on the case. This meeting marked a significant step in improving communication with the Ramsey family, who have long criticized the BPD for its handling of the case in its early years. Redfern has publicly acknowledged past investigative shortcomings from 1996, but maintains that the department's current focus is on identifying the perpetrator through modern forensic techniques. He has overseen the submission of dozens of evidence items to the Colorado Bureau of Investigation for DNA testing, a process that includes both retesting older evidence with advanced technology and analyzing previously untested items from the crime scene. Redfern has expressed optimism about the potential for a breakthrough, stating in public updates that the BPD is committed to following every lead and working with DNA experts nationwide. His leadership has also emphasized transparency, as seen in the BPD's early release of its annual case update in November 2024, prompted by heightened public interest following a Netflix docuseries. The Colorado Bureau of Investigation, or CBI, is a critical partner in the ongoing investigation, particularly in the realm of forensic analysis. As of September 2025, the CBI is actively testing dozens of evidence items from the case, ranging from items previously examined to new pieces from the crime scene that have never undergone forensic analysis. This effort leverages breakthroughs in DNA technology, including genetic genealogy, which has proven effective in solving other cold cases. The CBI has updated over 750 reference samples with the latest DNA techniques, ensuring that the evidence in the system is compatible with new samples for accurate comparisons. Their work focuses on the unidentified DNA found on the victim's clothing, which has been a cornerstone of the investigation since it excluded the Ramsey family as suspects in 2008. The CBI's collaboration with the BPD and the FBI underscores a multi-agency approach aimed at capitalizing on technological advancements to identify the perpetrator. While specific details about the items under testing remain confidential to protect the investigation, the CBI's involvement signals a renewed push to resolve the case. The FBI provides significant support to the BPD, contributing expertise in forensic analysis and cold case investigations. Their role includes assisting with the digitization of evidence, which has resulted in a searchable database containing over 1 million pages of reports, 21,000 tips, and forensic samples from 200 individuals. This database has been instrumental in allowing investigators to reevaluate leads and apply modern forensic methods. The FBI's collaboration extends to consultations with private DNA laboratories across the country, which are tasked with analyzing the limited and complex DNA evidence available. These labs are exploring the viability of genetic genealogy, a technique that could potentially trace the unidentified DNA to a suspect or their relatives. The FBI's involvement ensures that the investigation benefits from federal resources and cutting-edge forensic capabilities, reinforcing the BPD's efforts to pursue every possible lead. District Attorney Michael Dufferty, from the Boulder County District Attorney's Office, is another key figure in the investigation. His office works closely with the BPD, CBI, and FBI to review evidence and assess its potential for prosecution. Dufferty has emphasized the importance of securing robust evidence, particularly DNA, to build a case that can hold up in court. He participated in the cold case review panel convened by the BPD in December 2023, which brought together experts from various agencies to analyze the case and generate new investigative recommendations. Dufferty has expressed gratitude for the panel's independent assessment, noting that it provided valuable insights into applying the latest forensic science advancements. His approach is grounded in a commitment to evidence-based prosecution, drawing on his office's experience with other cold case homicides. Dufferty's public statements reflect a focus on collaboration and a determination to achieve justice, without any indication of suspicion directed at the Ramsey family. The Cold Case Review Panel, established by the BPD in December 2023, represents a significant recent development in the investigation. Comprising experts from the FBI, CBI, Boulder County District Attorney's Office, and both public and private forensic laboratories, the panel spent a year reviewing the digitized evidence archive. Their work resulted in a detailed list of recommendations, which the BPD is currently prioritizing and implementing. These recommendations include further DNA testing and the exploration of new forensic technologies, such as genetic genealogy, to identify the source of the unidentified male DNA. The panel's efforts have been praised by both Chief Redfern and District Attorney Duffy for providing fresh perspectives and actionable steps. While the specific recommendations remain confidential to preserve the investigation's integrity, they have guided the BPD's recent focus on retesting evidence and analyzing previously unexamined items from the crime scene. John Andrew Ramsey, the victim's older half-brother, is not an official investigator but plays an active role in advocating for the case's resolution. In September 2025, he attended CrimeCon in Aurora, where he met with Chief Redfern alongside his father, John Ramsey, and stepmother, Jan Ramsey. During this meeting, he received updates on the ongoing DNA testing at the CBI, which he described as a slow march, but a sign of progress. John Andrew has been vocal about the importance of testing specific items, such as the knots on the garrote used in the crime, believing that the perpetrator's direct handling of these items could yield critical DNA evidence. He supports the use of genetic genealogy to trace the unidentified DNA and has expressed cautious optimism about the BPD's current efforts under Redfern's leadership. Unlike earlier years when he criticized the BPD for focusing on the Ramsey family, he now believes the department is not targeting them as suspects, reflecting a shift in the investigation's direction. Cindy Mara, the daughter of the late Detective Lou Smit, leads an independent investigative group continuing her father's work on the case. Based in Colorado Springs, Mara and her team of approximately 6 members, including retired Detective John Anderson, maintain a spreadsheet of over 600 suspects compiled by Smit. They have excluded around 25 individuals through DNA analysis and continue to collect new samples. The group has been reinvigorated by new data after the November 2024 Netflix docuseries, Cold Case: Who Killed JonBenéт Ramsey. Mara's team shares information with the BPD, though they have reported resistance in fully collaborating. They are currently awaiting outcomes from the Ramsey family's recent meeting with Redfern before pursuing further engagement with the BPD. Mara's efforts are supported by a GoFundMe campaign to fund their independent investigation, and she remains committed to her father's intruder theory, focusing on identifying an external perpetrator through DNA evidence. Recent investigative actions have been spurred by heightened public interest, particularly following the Netflix docuseries released in November 2024. The series prompted the BPD to issue its annual update a month early, addressing claims and clarifying that it, not the CBI, convened the Cold Case Review Panel in 2023. The docuseries also generated new tips which the BPD is actively reviewing. Additionally, the submission of dozens of evidence items to the CBI in 2025 marks a significant step, with a focus on both retesting older evidence and analyzing new items, such as those from the basement crime scene. John Andrew Ramsey highlighted the potential of the garrote's knots, noting their complexity suggests the perpetrator's direct involvement, increasing the likelihood of recoverable DNA. The BPD's collaboration with private DNA labs and the FBI continues to explore genetic genealogy, aiming to trace the unidentified male DNA to a viable suspect. These efforts reflect a multifaceted approach, combining technological advancements, interagency cooperation, and renewed engagement with the Ramsey family to push the investigation forward. When we step back from the chaos of the JonBenéт Ramsey case, what stands out most is not only the tragedy of a young girl's death, but the ripple effect of what happens when transparency is absent. This case has become a textbook example of how credibility can be built or destroyed depending on the clarity, or the lack of it, offered by those in the center. John Ramsey and his family carried themselves in ways that left room for suspicion, while investigators themselves acted with a level of negligence that compounded the doubt. Together, these choices blurred the path to truth and left scars that extend far beyond one household. Transparency is more than a word, it is the currency of trust. Without it, even innocent people risk being defined by shadows, while those tasked with uncovering the truth risk losing all legitimacy. The possibility that John had ties with officers to soften or redirect the focus of the investigation may never be fully proven, but the pattern of benefit and protection cannot be ignored. At the same time, the investigators' failures, whether from incompetence or compromise, ensured that suspicion would linger, unanswered, for decades. The lesson here is sobering: when institutions fail to uphold accountability, and when individuals in power fail to be open, justice does not just stall, it corrodes. The story ceases to be about truth and becomes about influence, money, and control. And once credibility is lost, it is almost impossible to restore. So the question we are left with is this: if transparency had been present from the beginning, would the outcome have been different? Would trust in both the family and the justice system still be intact today? And most of all, how many more cases will we watch unravel in the same way before we demand better?